The box is open. The parts are spread across the floor. There are 16 steps in the manual. Diagrams, labels, arrows pointing to exactly where everything goes. And you haven't looked at it once. You already know how this works. You can figure it out. You don't need a piece of paper telling you what to do. 45 minutes later, there are 3 parts left over. The thing is mostly assembled, and you are absolutely certain those leftover parts were optional.
If any of that sounds familiar, you're not alone. And this is not a joke about men being stubborn or overconfident. The psychology behind why so many men refuse to read instructions is far more layered and far more revealing than anyone gives it credit for. It connects to how men process challenge, how they build identity, what they believe about competence, and what they were taught very early about what it means to need help. By the end of this video, you're going to understand something about yourself or someone you know that explains a lot more than just the flat pack furniture.
Welcome back. This is where we go deep into the psychology of men. The patterns, the science, the things most people never stop to examine. Subscribe if you're new. Let's get into it. Here's what most people get wrong about this. They assume the man who ignores the instructions is overconfident, arrogant, too proud to admit he might need guidance. That's not what's happening. For most men, competence isn't just a skill, it's an identity. From an extremely early age, boys are measured by what they can do, what they can build, what they can fix, what they can figure out without asking anyone for help. Think about it. When a boy solves something on his own, there is praise, pride, recognition. When a boy asks for help too quickly, there is often something else, disappointment, impatience, the subtle suggestion that he should have been able to handle it.
Psychologists call this mastery orientation, the deep, internal drive to demonstrate capability through independent problem solving. And for men who grew up in environments where competence was the primary currency of respect, the instruction manual isn't just a booklet, it's a test. Reading it means admitting you don't already know, and admitting you don't know, even to a piece of paper, alone in a room with nobody watching, still feels like something to avoid.
Here's something that surprises people. Neuroscience research on problem solving shows that the brain releases a significantly larger dose of dopamine when it solves a problem through trial and error, compared to when it follows a predetermined set of steps. In other words, figuring it out yourself feels better than being told how. Not because men are wired to be difficult, because the brain genuinely rewards independent discovery more than guided instruction. When you follow instructions, your brain is executing, following a script, filling in blanks that someone else created. When you figure it out yourself, your brain is exploring, mapping, creating its own solution. And every small step forward triggers a small reward. The man who ignores the manual and digs into the parts isn't being irrational. His brain is actually running a more rewarding cognitive process. The instructions would make it easier, but easier and more satisfying are not the same thing.
There's another layer to this that most people never consider. Research consistently shows that men, on average, score higher on certain spatial reasoning tasks, mentally rotating objects, understanding three-dimensional relationships, seeing how parts fit together without being told. This is not about intelligence. It's about a specific cognitive style. For men with strong spatial reasoning, a diagram on a page often feels slower than just handling the physical parts directly. Their brain can look at the object, feel the weight of the components, and understand the relationship between pieces faster through touch and observation than through reading. The instruction manual assumes a linear reader. Many men are not linear processors. They are spatial ones. And for a spatial thinker, the manual isn't a shortcut. It's a detour. There's a concept in psychology called autonomy need, the fundamental human drive to feel like you are the author of your own actions, that you are choosing how to do things.
not being directed. For men specifically, autonomy need tends to be especially strong. Research on male psychology consistently finds that men respond better to challenges framed as opportunities to demonstrate capability than to instructions framed as directions to follow. The instruction manual is, at its core, someone else telling you what to do. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Do it this way, in this order, according to this plan. And something in the male brain, trained from childhood to assert independence, to resist being told, to find its own path, quietly pushes back. Not because the man is being difficult, because following directions feels like giving up a piece of control. And control over outcomes, over process, over how things get done is deeply tied to how men experience their own competence. Here's something interesting. Men who most strongly resist instructions in their personal lives are often the same men who are most capable of following complex systems at work, when they respect the source. The resistance isn't to instructions themselves, it's to instructions from a source that hasn't earned authority. A flat-pack furniture company has not earned authority. A generic user manual has not earned authority. But a mentor who has done it before, a father, a colleague, someone who demonstrably knows, that's different. Men follow that willingly. So it's not about refusing to learn. It's about who gets to teach. Here is the part nobody talks about. The men who most reliably skip instructions are often the ones who least need them. They have built, through years of hands-on experience, a mental library of how things work, how components relate to each other, what a stuck piece means, what a wrong angle sounds like. They are reading the object, not the booklet. And that ability to read a physical system intuitively, without documentation, is a genuine cognitive skill, one that takes years to develop, one that most people never build because they always reach for the instructions first. The man with 3 leftover parts has almost always done this before. He knows which parts are truly optional. He knows what the wobble means and what it doesn't mean. He knows that step 12 in the manual is completely unnecessary if you do step 8 slightly differently. The instruction manual was written for the average person. He is not operating at average. And here is the paradox at the center of it all. The same man who refuses to read the instructions for a bookshelf will spend 3 hours reading everything ever written about an engine he wants to rebuild, will memorize every specification of a piece of equipment that genuinely interests him, will go deep into the documentation of something he has chosen to master. The resistance was never to information. It was to being told. When he chooses to learn, there are no limits to how deep he'll go. When someone else decides he needs to be instructed, the wall goes up immediately. That distinction between chosen learning and imposed direction is one of the most consistent and defining features of the male psychological profile. Most of the time, this works fine. The furniture gets built, the device gets fixed, the thing gets done. But sometimes the 3 leftover parts are not optional. Sometimes step 1 matters because step 7 won't work without it. Sometimes the shortcut costs 3 times as long as the manual would have. And the men who struggle most with this are usually the ones for whom asking for help, even from a booklet, even in private, still carries a weight it shouldn't. Because somewhere along the way, needing guidance got confused with being inadequate. And that confusion between needing information and being incompetent is worth examining. The most capable men in any field read obsessively. They document everything. They study how others solve the same problem before them, not because they lack confidence, because they know that other people's knowledge is just compressed experience, and experience is always worth having. So the next time you watch a man spread parts across the floor and set the manual to one side, don't assume he doesn't know what he's doing. He might be running a more rewarding cognitive process than you are. He might be reading the object in a language the booklet can't speak. He might be protecting something, his sense of capability, his autonomy, his right to figure things out on his own terms. Or he might genuinely need step 4. And just hasn't admitted it yet. Either way, those 3 leftover parts are probably fine. Drop a comment. Have you ever assembled something without reading the instructions? And how did it go? I read every single one. See you in the next one.